Hello, friend. Thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today, let's spend some time with Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens. This book was originally published in book form in 1865. It was published serially over the course of 1864 and 1865, but appeared in its final form in 1865 from what I could determine of its publication history. I listened to an audio edition of this that was read by Simon Vance that was just delightful. I wanted to read this again because I never chatted it on my channel. It's actually the third time I've read it over the course of many decades, though. So it's one of my favorite Dickens novels, and I always enjoy it. And I did enjoy this audio edition very, very much. So, Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens. So what is this about? This is a Dickens novel, so it's got a huge cast of characters. I counted up 19 or so what I'm calling major characters, and then 17 or 18 or 19 even more minor characters, but yet still speak in the book. So around 36 to 38 or so, 39 characters total in the book. So a lot going on as far as the characters go, and they're all pretty well fleshed out, as you would expect from a Dickens novel, which is all about the kind of the eccentric characters that inhabit the Dickens world. I thought the best way to approach this chat would actually be to go over really just the kind of the characters that really stuck out in my mind or entertained me the most. And in that way, I can also describe a bit about the story. There is a mystery going on here. And so I don't want to give away any kind of spoilers that I think would detract from a first-time reader's experience with this story, because it's uncovering that mystery is part of the fun, actually. But as the story opens, there is a man and his daughter, we discover. Gaffer Hexam and his daughter Lizzie are out plying in the river, and they have found a body. So we kind of discover this is actually how Mr. Hexam, Gaffer Hexam, actually earns his money, is just fishing out stuff out of the river Thames. This takes place obviously in England, London, and so. Yeah, and it turns out this body is taken to be that of one John Harmon. So John Harmon was the son of a wealthy dust man. So a dust collector. I had to look this up. Exactly what is a dust collector or dust fortune? And this was in the Victorian era. It was basically rubbish, but had a saleable value, and so people could actually make quite a bit of money on things like coal dust. And so anyway, John Harmon was the heir to this. He had a sort of a miserly, mean father, and he had been abroad, and his father had left this will that he could inherit the money as long as he married a certain woman, Bella Wilfer, and it's sort of mysterious why this was a stipulation in the will, but he was coming back actually to do this. And anyway, his body is identified as being this body at the very beginning of this story, and so Bella Wilfer, the Wilfer family, we'll get to here in a minute. Let's talk first about the Boffin family. So Mr. and Mrs. Boffin are sort of simple souls. They had been servants or caretakers or employees of old Mr. Harmon, and they were very kindly towards his two children, John and John's sister, who had already passed away previously. And so the will stipulated that if John Harmon did not marry Bella or was not able to inherit the fortune, that the fortune would then pass to Mr. and Mrs. Boffin. So they inherit this vast wealth, and they're very simple and kindly people. So they actually go to befriend young Bella Wilfer, who is the woman who was supposed to marry John. Now, she doesn't know him at all or why she's tied to him. Her family's sort of not poor, but also not wealthy. The father, Mr. Wilfer, works as a clerk. He's a middle-aged, kindly man who works as a clerk and sort of in a drudgery. And we're going to talk more about money and the different ways it's represented in this story a little later in this chat. But anyway, they befriend Bella, and because she's had such misfortune in this man she was supposed to marry, she's actually wearing widow's clothes and things, even though she didn't even know him, right? So she's really bitter about this, and she wants money at this point in her life. They take her to live with them, actually, in this new wealth that they have. So I've already talked about Lizzie Hexam, the young woman who was with her father when this body was pulled from the river that was later identified to be John Harmon. Lizzie has a brother, Charlie. She's a very kindly young woman, and Charlie is kind of an ungrateful brother. She works a lot to try to put him through school and get an education for him. He doesn't really appreciate this. But there's Miss John Rokesmith. So Mr. Rokesmith shows up, and he actually wants to become a secretary to Mr. Boffin. Now that Mr. Boffin has found wealth, he takes lodging with the Wilfer family. So he's actually with the Wilfers. So whenever Mr. and Mrs. Boffin go to call on the Wilfers to invite Bella to come and stay with them, then they say, "Oh, I understand that you have a lodger, Mr. Rokesmith, and he's our mutual friend." So therefore the title of the book, Our Mutual Friend. So Mr. Rokesmith then does become employed as Mr. Boffin's secretary, and then he has this, he becomes infatuated with Bella. Now, Bella wants money, right? She wants to marry well. She now wants money. She sees money as her avenue to security and to happiness. And so he's only a secretary, right? So she's sort of distant from him and not interested, right? There's another man then there's Lizzie Hexam, like I mentioned. She's very sweet. She gets the attention of a Mr. Eugene Rayburn, who is a lawyer. He does not have honorable intentions with Lizzie, though. We, as the reader, understand this early on. There is another young man that's interested in Miss Hexam, and that is Bradley Headstone. Bradley Headstone is the headmaster of the school where Lizzie is sending her brother Charlie. And so Bradley's interested in her, but she's not really interested in him. She actually she likes Eugene Rayburn, but we know he doesn't really have honorable intentions, at least at this stage in the novel. And so, there's a little bit of caution there. Her father ends up dying, so she goes to live, her brother's then at school, so she goes to live with a young woman named Miss Jenny Wren, who is one of the most delightful characters in the entire novel. I love this character. She is like a dwarf. She's a small person, and she's crippled. She got like a bad back, and her legs are off, and so she can't walk real well. And one of her little catchphrases that she has in the book is, because my back's so bad and my legs are so queer, she can't get around really well. But she's a very, very acute and astute observer of humankind. She's got a father who she calls her child. Her father is a drunk, and she treats her father like a child and actually calls him her bad child. But she's a very amusing character. She's got a very vivid inner life that we come to know. She can imagine flowers and nice children because children had been mean to her when she was a child. And so she's very cautious. Her other catchphrase in the novel is, "I know your tricks and your manners," or "I know their tricks and their manners." She understands humankind really well, I think. And then there's a couple of other characters that I thought were really interesting. Mr. and Mrs. Lammel. So these characters, they married each other kind of at the beginning of the book. They had pretenses of being wealthy. They presented themselves as wealthy to each other in order to get the other person to marry them, because they thought, so like Mr. Lammel thought who was to become Mrs. Lammel was wealthy because of the way she presented herself, and she thought he was wealthy. But once they got married, they realized neither one of them was wealthy and they had no money, so they go to scheme to try to get money. And one of the ways they do that is from another really delightful character in the book, Georgiana Podsnap. So Georgiana Podsnap she's kind of the definition of social anxiety. That term didn't exist in the 19th century, but she's very shy. She's very withdrawn. But Mrs. Lammel actually befriends her to try to manipulate her into marrying this certain man in order to then sort of get money from her and from this other man. So she's sort of in danger there for a while in the novel. So yeah, that's kind of the main characters that there's many more, and there's many more that we could talk about that were delightful and had delightful things to say and delightful things to do. Not everybody's nice. There's some bad guys. Mr. Weg is a guy who's selling ballads like on the street. He's got a wooden leg, and Mr. Boffin takes a liking to him and hires him to come and read to him from the decline and fall of the Roman Empire every night because Mr. Boffin doesn't read. And so Mr. Weg is barely literate himself, but he goes and reads and insinuates himself into the life of Mr. Boffin with the aim of, bilking him for as much money as he possibly can. So money, 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 that's really the theme of the entire book, I think. It's money. I jotted down a note here, money and what the desire for it can lead to. So some characters in the book, this desire for money leads them into good, and some are indifferent to it. But that's sort of illustrated. And then also money and what the having of it or the not having of it can lead to. So some characters in the book don't have money, yet they remain good people. Some characters in the book, once they get money, it appears that it turns them into bad people. And some people, the striving for money, can do the same thing. It can lead them to become unscrupulous people and to become manipulative and also liars and sort of that sort of thing. So this money and where it can lead. There's also characters in the book like Mr. Wilfer, who works as a clerk, who lives in this life of drudgery, but nevertheless is a very happy person. There's a quote from one of the characters in the book that says, "I can't afford to be rich yet." I love that quote because that's saying, like, he's a happy person. This is not Mr. Wilfer. It's another character, but I don't want to give that away because it would kind of be a spoiler to what happens eventually in the book. But he's got this happy life. And if he were to become rich at this point, it would upset that life. It would change that life. And it's a risk anytime that you get money involved in your life. It's a risk to either for good or for bad. And then the other sort of main theme is the love of other people, and this can also turn us into better people. We can want to be better people we want to be better people for those who love us, and then also love can also turn into obsession, right, and become a very dangerous thing, and we see that illustrated in the book as well. So I think that's all I want to say about this book. I just loved it, though. It's a significant time investment. It's a big book. I listened to it this time, and it was 34 hours or so. So it took a while to get through, but I enjoyed every single minute of it. It's just so much fun, and I could listen to it again. I could actually literally turn it on and start listening to it again. I enjoyed it that much. But I will leave the chat there. My next chat is going to be The Shadow Rising, some fantasy, some Wheel of Time fantasy by Robert Jordan. I have already finished this, so I will have a chat on it coming up fairly soon. So until next time, take care. Bye.